There are two kinds of scenes that get cut from movies: the ones nobody misses and the ones everybody misses. The rogue cut is a perfect case study in the second kind. But what if the difference between the two comes down to a single structural principle in storytelling? One that is understood by the greatest filmmakers, but usually ignored by studios, and almost impossible to see as a fan unless you know exactly where to look. Okay, quick question. Have you ever rewatched a movie that you loved as a kid and thought, wait, this is kind of slow? Or gone to see something with insane reviews and found yourself drifting after the first hour? That's pacing. Or rather, that's the absence of it. And before you say, well, pacing is just how fast or slow a movie moves, nope, that's speed. Pacing is something far more surgical. Think of it this way. Imagine you're at a concert. The band plays 3 of their most intense, stadium-shaking songs back to back. Incredible, right? Now imagine they do that for 2 hours straight. Same intensity, no breaks, no acoustic moment, no crowd sing-along. By the end, you're not electrified, you're just numb. That's why great concerts build. They have peaks and valleys. The quiet song in the middle that makes everyone hold up their phones. The pause before the encore. The slow build back to the finale. Movies work exactly the same way. Every single scene in a movie has to pull in the same direction, at the right time, or the whole thing seizes up. And the part that controls all of this, the part most people never even consciously register, is pacing. Pacing is the heartbeat of a film. It's the invisible rhythm that tells your brain something matters, stay alert, or in its absence, relax. This doesn't count. Now, here's where it gets interesting. In a standard 2-hour movie, there is a rule called the 25-50-25 rule. This rule splits a movie's runtime across acts 1, 2, and 3. It dictates that your brain needs a massive narrative shift roughly every 15 minutes. Think of a movie like a funnel. The middle of the movie, the second act, is where you pour everything in. Subplots, backstory, romantic tension, world building, secondary characters, theme. All of it goes in the wide top. But by the time you hit that third act, the final 25%, the funnel squeezes down to a single burning point. One protagonist, one conflict. To force that funnel to squeeze, filmmakers use the ultimate narrative tool, the ticking clock. Now, a ticking clock doesn't have to be a literal explosive counting down to 0 with red wire. It could be the Joker giving Batman exactly 5 minutes to choose between saving Harvey Dent or Rachel Dawes in The Dark Knight. For Infinity War, the entire film operates on a progressive ticking clock. Instead of a timer counting down, the clock is Thanos' gauntlet counting up. Every time Thanos acquires a new Infinity Stone, the clock ticks. The audience physically sees the threat escalating. This narrative prevents detours and subplots because if the heroes stop moving, Thanos gets another stone. The psychological effect is profound because it defines the exact parameters of failure. But more importantly, here is the golden rule. If a film establishes a ticking clock, but then allows its characters to engage in a leisurely subplot anyway, the structural integrity of the narrative completely shatters. The pacing dies. The moment a filmmaker ignores that funnel, the moment they keep pouring new stuff in while the climax is supposed to be compressing, you lose the audience. Not all at once, gradually, like air escaping a balloon. Imagine Adam Warlock, the main protagonist in the Infinity War comic book run, suddenly being introduced in Wakanda in the final act against Thanos.
Who threw this thing at me?
It would completely damage the momentum. You can't introduce massive new elements at the end of the funnel, and there is no better example of what this actually looks like in action than taking a proper look at the rogue cut. Now, I know most of you, myself included, loved it, but I am not here to debate that. I just want to look at it from a storyteller's point of view. So, take off your audience glasses for a sec and stay with me. When a climax of a movie is happening in multiple places at once, different timelines, different locations, different characters all racing toward the same finish line, how do you make the audience feel all of it simultaneously? You cut between them, fast, deliberately, back and forth, like a tennis match where both sides are going band for band. This is called parallel editing, or cross-cutting, and it's one of the oldest tricks in cinema, and still one of the most powerful. Here's why it works. When you cut between two scenes happening at the same time in different locations, your brain does something automatic and kind of incredible. It connects them. It assumes they're talking to each other, that what's happening over there is directly affecting what's happening over here. You didn't choose to feel it. You just do. It's hardwired. But, and this is the crucial part, it's an illusion, a manufactured one. The editor built it. Those scenes might have been shot 6 months apart on opposite sides of the world. The causality isn't real. You just believe it is. Inception is the textbook example of this done perfectly. The climax is one of the most coherent, breathless sequences ever put on film. Why? Because every single layer is chained to the same ticking clock. The van falling off the bridge. Cut to the van, cut to the hotel, cut back to the van. And your pulse goes with it every single time because your brain already did the math. These things are connected. If the van hits the water before they're done, it's over.
We are screwed.
That's the magic of parallel editing when it's working. The problem, and there always is one, is when it isn't. In the theatrical cut of Days of Future Past, there's a moment where Kitty Pryde gets badly injured when Wolverine loses control. And suddenly, the entire future timeline has a brutal biological ticking clock. If she dies, Wolverine snaps back, and the past is locked forever. That's the squeeze of the funnel I talked about earlier. That's the movie saying, all roads lead here. There is no detour. Figure it out, or everyone is gone. In the Rogue cut, when Kitty gets injured, the future X-Men's response is to mount a rescue mission to a prison, to break out Rogue so she can absorb Kitty's powers and take over the time travel duty. And look, on paper, that sounds kinda cool, right? But here's what it actually does structurally. It removes the ticking clock. Kitty is no longer the fragile, injured linchpin that the entire movie depends on. She's just sidelined. And suddenly the movie, which was supposed to be in its climax, the most compressed, most urgent, most narrow point of the story, is now introducing a brand new mission, a new set of action beats, and a character who has had virtually zero screen time in the preceding 90 minutes. The funnel just blew itself open again. And it gets worse, because now the editor has to cross-cut this rogue rescue mission with young Magneto breaking into a government facility in 1973. Here's the problem. One of those sequences is Magneto reclaiming his helmet, an item that makes him immune to Professor X's powers and sets up his betrayal at the climax. That's a pivotal narrative beat, character-defining, high stakes. Recall that Magneto was a pivotal part of the story since Act 1. The other is getting Rogue out of jail so she can cover for Kitty. These are not equal. They are not close to equal. Because one story is obviously more important, and cutting away from it to the lesser one just highlights the imbalance. You've probably felt this in bad action movies. Two things happening at once, but you only care about one. So every time it cuts to the other, you're just waiting to get back to the real story. That's asymmetrical cross-cutting, and it damages the pacing of a movie.
Dostoevsky.
The theatrical cut of Days of Future Past knew this. It made the hard call. Cut the rescue mission. Keep Kitty injured. Keep the clock running. Force the future X-Men into a desperate last stand, not a side quest. Now, you could argue in the comments that the Rogue cut actually explains that the reason the Sentinels found the monastery where the X-Men were hiding was by following a tracking device planted on the ship during the rescue mission. But were those extra minutes of detour really essential to the overall story? Not really. In Act 1, Iceman already established that the Sentinels are inevitable. They were always going to find the X-Men. The theatrical cut trusted the audience to remember that rule, while the Rogue cut widened the funnel to over-explain it.
You won't have much time in the past. The Sentinels will find us. They always do.
And this time we won't be able to run.
Do you see it now from my point of view when you take off those audience glasses? You could also make an argument that the Rogue cut is better for the characters. And honestly, you aren't completely wrong. There are brilliant thematic reasons why the filmmakers fought to include this sequence. It creates a poetic mirror. Magneto's selfish heist in the past versus the X-Men's selfless heist in the future. It proves that the surviving X-Men haven't lost their humanity. They are still practicing Charles Xavier's core belief that every single mutant life matters, even if saving Rogue jeopardizes the mission. And honestly, It gives legacy characters like Iceman a deeply emotional, heroic sacrifice, instead of just making him a disposable side character. Those are fantastic, character-rich ideas. But here is the harsh reality of the editing room. Brilliant ideas do not excuse a broken structure. A scene can be emotionally devastating, beautifully acted, and thematically perfect, but if it stops your ticking clock and widens your narrative funnel at the exact moment it needs to compress, it still has to go.
Mr. President, we just wanted to... Get out of my house!
This isn't just an X-Men problem. This is a foundational rule of cinema. Once you see the pattern, you realize it is everywhere. Think about Star Wars, A New Hope. The original script had an entire opening on Tatooine, Tashi Station. Luke hanging out with his friends, including his best friend Biggs. Lucas cut the whole thing. Every frame. Gone. Why? For the sake of narrative pacing. Because after the electric, explosive opening with Darth Vader boarding the starship and capturing Princess Leia, one of the greatest opening sequences in cinema history, cutting to a teenager complaining about picking up power converters is not a pace decrease. It's a crash. So Luke doesn't show up until the droids show up. The plot inciting incident and the protagonist arrive at the same moment. The story moves. Biggs becomes a background character. Marsha Lucas won the Oscar for editing, and A New Hope became the highest-grossing film in history at the time. A sacrificial excision made a legend. Now let's also use Age of Ultron as another case study. The film was building toward its climax. Ultron had a plan. The team was fracturing. Stakes were escalating. And then Thor leaves. Just leaves. Goes to a cave, has a vision, learns about Infinity Stones, comes back. Why? Not for this movie's story, for future movies, for the franchise. The cave scene exists to plant seeds for Phase 3 of the MCU. It's connective tissue for a cinematic universe that doesn't exist yet. Within the bubble of this single film, it was a catastrophic structural rupture. The ticking clock just stopped so someone could read the menu for the next restaurant you're going to visit 2 years from now. Director Joss Whedon later said the studio mandate on that scene was one of the things that broke the movie. Well, he wasn't wrong.
That's what she said.
These decisions, all of them, cost something. A friendship made meaningful. 17 minutes of expensive footage. Fan service. These are real losses. But the films that made the cuts? They endured, and are still regarded as some of the best movies ever made. So I'll wrap up with this. The best storytellers in Hollywood aren't the ones who have the most ideas. They're the ones who know which ideas belong in this story at this moment, serving this clock. Everything else, no matter how expensive, no matter how beloved, no matter how clever, goes on the cutting room floor. And that is not failure. That is the job. If you enjoyed this video, don't just subscribe, though yeah, please do that. Then tell me in the comments. Name the movie. Think about the last movie that lost you in the third act. I'll see you in the next one.
You know, with the benefit of hindsight,